Fight Talk. This past weekend, Saturday night, UFC 292. This week, the name on the marquee, gentlemen, has got to be Sugar Sean O'Malley, who this past weekend at the TD Garden in Boston, Massachusetts, in front of 18,000 strong at UFC 292, defeated Aljamain Sterling by TKO in round number 2, the official time, 51 seconds of round number 2. In doing so, becoming the newly crowned UFC bantamweight champion. Mark, let me start with you. What was your take on the performance, first of all, of Sean O'Malley and the meteoric rise of this guy from where he came from to where he is now, and just the star that he has become and is continuing to bloom into?
Yeah, I mean, Sean O'Malley did it, man. None of us thought that he would, and he did it. He finished the champ. He finished him in style. And I don't know if you've seen the side-by-sides that they've been putting out there with his shot on Aljo and Conor's shot on Aldo. But, man, It is crazy how the sports world always gives us poetic things like this. To have this kid whose game is so similar to Conor's, in terms of the footwork and the feints and the movement and the striking acumen and that one-hitter quitter power. He's so similar in so many ways. To have him win a belt with the same exact shot Conor won his with is just nuts to me. But he was brilliant, man. I've heard a lot of people saying, oh, what a strange fight. I can't believe Aljo didn't try to wrestle. Why did he think he should strike with Sean? I promise you Aljo wanted to wrestle in that fight. In fact, it's the only thing he wanted to do. He almost didn't even throw a single punch in round 1 because he had no intention of trying to strike with Sean. All he threw was kicks to keep O'Malley off him and try to force him to move in a way where he could find an entry that he liked. But the problem was that it didn't work. He could not find an entry where he felt comfortable. Early on in the fight, he was trying to pressure Sean, trying to make him move in a way that would open something up. He couldn't create any opportunities there. Then 2 minutes in, he switched it up. He was like, all right, maybe I'll back up. I'll make Sean come to me and I'll find something. No different. Sean's footwork was just too damn good. He was too elusive. His feints had Aljo frozen. He was thinking too much. And he couldn't find any entries where he felt like he wasn't going to get cracked in the face by a Sean O'Malley right hand. And he did finally grab a leg with 20 seconds left in round 1. But at that point, it was too late for him to do anything with it. Round 2, he gets his break. Sean falls, which gives Aljo the opening to rush and clinch up as Sean stood back up. And this was the one that Sean had to get away from. And you find that after the fight, Sean was pretty banged up and wasn't even able to grapple in this camp. So props to him because he did. He got away. He escaped. Aljo, he had that little taste of being able to grab a hold of him. And maybe he got a little frustrated and he was like, you know what, I can punch my way right back inside. I'll get him against the fence again. And he couldn't. He lost the belt because of it. He made one mistake, and O'Malley was that damn dialed in that all he needed was one mistake. And he got it, and he dropped Aljo on his face with a step-back counter right that couldn't have been more perfect. And Aljo stayed in it, to his credit. I do get the people saying, oh, he was trying to get back to his knees at the time of the stoppage. But Goddard doesn't know that. It's a bunch of clean shots. Goddard's trying to give Aljo a chance. He sees Aljo roll over to his stomach, and he thinks that's Aljo saying that's it. He stops it, then the knees come. You can't tell that that's going to happen. So I don't have an issue with it. O'Malley earned every single inch of that, and Sugar Sean is the new UFC bantamweight champion.
Yeah, man. Mark Twain said, history doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes. And very applicable here.
Love that.
And
Love
how
that.
this
Really
knockout very much echoes the knockout of Conor. And how funny that the names of the opponents literally do rhyme with Aldo and Aljo.
Yeah.
Omar,
Wow.
Take us through that finishing sequence. What did you find most effective and most beautiful in that cannon of a right hand that Sean O'Malley employed so well?
It's the timing. It's the timing and it's the distance management. I mean, if you watch that fight in slow motion, if you've watched MMA as much as we've watched MMA, there's no way that in that moment when you saw that punch happen, you didn't immediately think to yourself, holy shit, that's McGregor and Aldo. You must have seen it immediately because it was the same type of timing, the same type of step back. It was obviously different sides, right? Because McGregor throws, left crosses, whereas O'Malley throws right crosses. But regardless, the movement and the timing and the technique was virtually the same. The entry was almost just as relatively sloppy as each other's were, right? Aldo, for as much as we love Aldo, and Aldo does have very good technique, in that fight, I think he got a little too wild, came in with some really cocked back hooks, and both of his hands were down when he was going in for that punch. So, I mean, he ate something that normally I think if he had his head on straight, probably wouldn't have eaten in a fight. And Aljamain was just a little too sloppy in there as well. Like, he's always been very unorthodox. He's always been very quote unquote funky, right, with his movement and his striking style. But the reality is against a sniper like that, and we talked about the sniper shit last week. Against a sniper like that, you can't make those kind of mistakes, and you can't put yourself within the range of the shot. And, Mark mentioned that I'm sure, that he's sure that O'Malley or that Sterling was trying to go for a takedown, that's what he wanted to do, that's what he wanted to grapple. I don't necessarily disagree, but it does sound like Aljamain, and we've seen this happen before, even with Luke Rockhold, where the guys go in there and they're like, maybe not necessarily overconfident, but they've gotten so much momentum, they've put themselves in a position where I think that they feel like they need to perform or maybe overperform and overcompensate maybe for whatever, right? Crowd pleasing or whatever the case is. And it did sound like even after the fact, Aljamain was like, I tried to go in there and I tried to do a little too much. I tried to want to win in kind of a crazy, fantastic way instead of just focusing on my game and doing what I know I needed to do. And it's very possible things might have turned out differently had he approached the fight a little bit different. Who knows? It really doesn't matter because the fight went the way it went. And O'Malley knocked that kid's head clean off for the belt. What an absolute performance.
Sean O'Malley has had, in my estimation, 2 tough fights in his career. Those being the Chito Vera fight and the Petr Yan fight. The Yan fight truly was very close. And Yan was the best striker that he's ever faced. And Chito, that fight ended towards the end of the first round with Chito winning by TKO. But up until
that had a lot. Yeah, that had a lot more to do with his injury, though, in the fight.
The leg sort of going to sleep because of the nerve thing.
Yeah. And who's not to say that Chito, the perennial nerve? Perineal, maybe. I can't remember. But I know that had much more to do with the story than just, quote-unquote, Chito beating O'Malley.
Oh, it was the story, yeah. That's why he always says he's undefeated.
Yes.
Yeah, he's like that fight didn't even happen. Like
it's not even that he's undefeated, right? That he beat Chito.
Yeah. Granted, the thing that happened to his leg happened because Chito was kicking it, so it's not the cleanest.
It also had happened before. Like he was on one leg in a fight prior to that as well, where he hobbled around for a minute before he won that fight.
That was the Sukumtat fight, right?
Yep. Yeah, and Sukumtat did the wrong thing and took down a dude with one leg instead of making him stand up and fight. But we're not going to do that to that poor man right now. We're just going to let him be.
That's true. So Sean O'Malley, man, he has not lost since that Chito Vera loss back in August of 2020, and he's now captured UFC gold. What do we see as being next for him? It's really not quite up to. He would say that it is very much up to him. But Mark, if you were the matchmaker of the UFC, what would be the match that you would most want to see? What do you think the fans most want to see, and what do you think makes the most sense?
There's a few ways to tackle this thing. The most obvious answer and the correct answer is, I'm going to even pivot off of that. Firstly, there's an argument to be made that Aljo should be getting an immediate rematch with the run that he has had. If we look past that, the correct answer is Merab. He is very clearly the number one contender. If it's not going to be Aljo, that's who it should be. However, I think the UFC is very aware of what they now have in Sean O'Malley. I think they are very aware of the moneymaker that he is. I don't know if you guys saw this. They uploaded the knockout to Twitter immediately after the fight, which they never, ever do for pay-per-view fights. So you could see the knockout immediately after all over Twitter, Instagram, everywhere. and they uploaded the full fight to YouTube. That's how much they want
wow.
people to be seeing this, because they know what O'Malley is in terms of viral and all the clicks he gets and all this. So if I had to guess, I think they know that Aljo is capable of beating him, and that certainly Merab is capable of beating him. And I think they would very much like him to get at least one title defense before he has to worry about being out grappled again. And I think they are going to go with the Cheeto fight.
Whew. Even though Cheeto beat him.
Yeah, and I'm not saying he can't lose to Cheeto as well. I just think it's fairly obvious that Cheeto is a bit safer of a matchup than a Merab.
Right. And with the added bonus that there already is so much heat to that rivalry.
Yes, and that it's what Sean wants and all of this. But yeah, I mean, Cheeto's interesting in his own right because you can't hurt him, and he lands huge shots. So like, if he doesn't go away, he could find a shot of his own. It's not like he doesn't have a chance. But again, I think it's a safer matchup than a Merab is.
Yeah, it's true. I think Merab would be really tough stylistically for.
Yeah, I
for
mean, think
O'Malley.
about what he just did
Merab just
to
doesn't stop.
Shota Yan. Like, imagine he did that to Sean O'Malley, and then everyone's like, "Oh wow, all right, well that Sean O'Malley thing is over with." Like, they don't. I don't think they want that this soon. I really don't.
It would be the biggest buzzkill for O'Malley's first title defense to just get wrestled into dust
Yeah.
for 5 rounds by this like Energizer Bunny guy, Merab. And I love Merab. I love what he stands for. I do love Merab as a personality in MMA. I mean, the whole stealing the jacket and putting it on right in front of the world.
Yeah, the storyline is there, and it's going to be tough to say to Merab if they go that route to say that he's not getting it because he's going to be like, "How the fuck am I not getting it?" But
Yeah.
But you're right too that like it's a compelling argument for Aljamain Sterling. I mean, I'm looking at his record now, and before this loss, he was on a 9-fight UFC win streak, including winning the title, and then 3 consecutive title defenses going into this past weekend. I feel like right when he lost, or I think even before, I think during the fight, I was like, if he loses, I feel like Aljo's kind of right on the bubble of deserving an immediate rematch. A la someone like Kamaru Usman. But yeah, I think you're right. I think promotionally it makes more sense for Cheeto. But Omar, let me get you in here. What are your thoughts on what could be next for the bantamweight belt?
So as far as my personal opinion, I do think it should be a rematch. I prefer rematches happen when somebody gets caught. If O'Malley had like beaten the shit out of Aljo for 5 rounds or something, like there's no need for a rematch. We don't need any of that, right?
Right.
There was a lot of feeling out. There was a lot of movement and attempted distance management from Aljo in that fight and stuff like that. But like we had never really gotten into a major clash in that fight, right? Like they were both trying to find their moment and their shots, and O'Malley found his. And that's just kind of how the fight went. And we're not taking anything away from O'Malley, but there are still questions on the table about what could have happened in that fight if something had gone different, if Aljo didn't get caught. And so I think just having another one of those fights to see if Aljo can get caught again, if Aljo can do something different, I just think would be like in their best interest personally. Because Aljo is, a great champion. He is very credentialed. He's beaten a ton of guys. Like it's very difficult to not call him one of the greatest bantamweights, if not the greatest bantamweight currently of all time. So I think he deserves the rematch. From what it sounds like, and this is something I heard Ray Longo speak about, it sounds like that they've asked him about what he wants, and he sounds like he wants a rematch, probably early 2024. So it's very possible that that's the route that they're going. I wouldn't be surprised, depending on what the time frames are, how things line up, and all that stuff. Maybe somebody else gets in there before, maybe Merab, maybe Cheeto. But from what I've kind of heard around, it does seem like Aljo might be getting that rematch.
Well, just because Longo's saying it. What do you mean? Why does that make?
Well, because Longo, it's not that Longo said it. Longo had a conversation with, I don't remember which one it was, if it's Maynard or if it's, I don't remember who deals with which weight class, but one of the two guys, right? Mick Maynard or what's his face?
Yeah.
What's the other one?
Sean Shelby?
Sean Shelby. So he was having a conversation with him and Aljo about the situation, and apparently they asked Aljo what he wanted to do and that he could, that they'll take into consideration what he wants to do and stuff like that. And he said, I want the rematch, because I guess they wanted to make sure that that's something that he wanted, because he was also talking about going up to 145 after this fight. But it now seems like he wants to stay at 135, at least for the rematch, and then potentially do something else after that. So
I'm not saying that's not legit, but I'm sure they then also went and had the same conversation with O'Malley and said what he wanted to do. And I'm sure
I don't doubt it either.
Rematch. So
yeah, and I'm sure O'Malley had his sights on Cheeto. He's been going back and forth with him on Twitter a little bit. He was going back and forth with Henry too, if I'm not mistaken. Henry tried to insert his chooch ass into that conversation.
Granted, he keeps saying he wants to fight Cheeto in December, so
right,
you could do that, and then
yes.
if he wins, then okay, Aljo's going to get his rematch in April. Like that's not hard to do. Aljo doesn't need to fight in between.
And I'm perfectly okay with that, because Aljo does take a little while. He said he doesn't want to fight for the rest of the year. He says he's done. He's on vacation. So that's totally fine. And if he can make an O'Malley, I can't imagine O'Malley can't be ready by the end of the year, considering he took no damage in that fight. So I could definitely see that happening. And I think it should happen if we're going to do it that soon.
Took, but...
Yeah.
And you're gonna have
he didn't seem like he got beat up either.
I mean, he never does. You could hit him with a bat, and he'd be like, "Yeah." But they'd have to find a fight from Rob, and maybe be Cejudo again, if they could convince them both that that's what they need to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm saying again because it was supposed to happen, not that it has happened.